Welcome to Getting Our Hearts Right, 3 Keys to Better Relationships. I'm Joanne Vann, Family and Consumer Science Agent with the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture Research and Extension Service in beautiful Clark County, Arkansas. Today, we will have an introduction into some barriers to good relationships. The rest of the week, we will explore each of the 3 keys. So let's get started. Conflict is a human problem. Conflict is also necessary for growth. Every story has conflict at its core. Can you think of any story where conflict was not at the core? Think of Cain and Abel, Elizabeth Taylor and her husband, Lindsay Lohan and everyone in the world, the Hatfields and McCoys, and continuing feuds in almost every family. For example, just this morning, did you have conflict with your roommate as you got ready? Did you feel annoyed with a family member? Did you get upset with another driver in traffic? So what do we do about conflict? There are 2 tools we typically try to provide to people. The first tool is knowledge. We try to arm people with knowledge in order to prevent or solve problems. We read books, we talk to experts, we take classes, we get advice. We believe that ignorance creates many problems that can be remedied with knowledge. The second tool we try to arm people with is skills. For example, the teaching of communication skills, such as the speaker-listener technique, is very popular. The only problem is that research shows that communication skills disappear in the face of conflict. In relationships, if all we do is stress communication skills to people without softening their hearts, we will simply make them more clever fighters. That's a quote by Doug Brindley. Another example is basketball. To be a good player, we need a knowledge of the game and the skills of dribbling, passing, and shooting. But what if we don't use the knowledge and skills that we have because we're mad at the coach or because we're annoyed with a teammate? What we need are not just knowledge and skills, but the motivation or willingness to use the knowledge and skills we have appropriately and in the best interest of others in the relationship. We need to be able to see past only our point of view. So getting our hearts right is really the key to success in relationships. Personal biases make it difficult to evaluate conflicts fairly. We think we're objective, but we're all wearing dirty glasses. Our dirty glasses distort and limit our view of the world around us. We focus on the small issues with others while we don't notice our own. There is hypocrisy in this. The problem of seeing imperfectly is especially problematic in relationships. Let's talk about some of the specific biases and distortions that have been discovered by research that keep us from even seeing the situation accurately. As we discuss each one, reflect on how you've seen this bias at work in your own thinking. Please pause the video and jot down your thoughts on page 3. Egocentrism. We focus on ourselves and our needs. We all center our lives on something. When we choose the self as the center of our universe, it changes everything. The problem is obvious with babies. They are almost completely focused on themselves. But the problem does not disappear as we mature. For example, in a relationship, a wife might say, "He doesn't even know I'm alive." And men might say, "She doesn't respect me." We all fail to understand each other. Tom Ryan said, "I was polishing my trophies the other day and happened to catch my reflection, and gee, it's easy to see why women are crazy about me." A very self-centered egotism expressed in that quote. George Bernard Shaw described humans as a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making them happy. We all suffer more or less from egocentrism, the view that I and my needs are at the center of the universe. Fundamental attribution bias. We tend to excuse our mistakes and faults because of our circumstances, while blaming others' misdeeds on their bad character. For example, if I cut in traffic, it's because I'm under pressure or in a hurry. But if you cut in traffic, it's because you're inconsiderate and unsafe. I have a messy desk or office because I'm busy. You have a messy desk because you're disorganized and a slob. It's easy to see how fundamental attribution bias affects us all. Dr. Lawrence J. Peters said, "Rare is the person who can weigh the faults of others without putting his thumb on the scales." Our inner lawyer always excuses us while condemning others. In the human tradition, we call this judging, and it ruins relationships. Naive realism. We tend to see biases and bad logic in other people, but fail to see it in ourselves. Each of us thinks we see the world directly, as it is. We further believe that the facts as we see them are all there is to see. Therefore, others should agree with us. If they don't agree, it follows either they don't have all the relevant facts, or else they are blinded by their own interest and ideologies. It just seems plain as day to the naive realist that everyone is influenced by ideology and self-interest, except for me, of course. I see things as they are. Naive realism has been called the biggest obstacle to world peace and social harmony. We all commit selfish and short-sighted acts, but our inner lawyer ensures that we do not blame ourselves or our allies for them. We are thus convinced of our own virtue, but quick to see the bias, greed, and duplicity in others. Reflect for a moment how these biases might be affecting your relationships. Anger narrows and blinds us. We see enemies in others. Once anger comes into play, people find it extremely difficult to empathize with and understand another's perspective. We see them as the enemy. Americans have tended to believe that anger is important to express and vital to use. That has caused a lot of grief. Of the 7 deadly sins, anger is possibly the most fun. To lick your wounds, to smack your lips over grievances long past, and to roll your tongue over this prospect of bitter confrontations still to come, to savor to the last toothsome morsel the pain you are given and the pain you are giving back. In many ways, it is a feast fit for a king. The chief drawback is that you are wolfing down yourself. The skeleton at the feast is you. That's a quote from Frederick Boschner, Wishful Thinking by Harper and Row. When you relate this to couples, by the time a couple's style of argument has escalated into shaming and blaming each other, the very purpose of their quarrels have shifted. It's no longer an effort to solve a problem or even get to the other person to modify their behavior. It's just to wound, insult, and score. Anger increases 5-fold the probability of a serious heart event. You can read more about this in Anger Kills by Redford and Virginia Williams. A final quote to think is, anger is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. Confirmation bias. We tend to accept only information that supports what we already believe. Once we have formed a view, we embrace information that supports that view, while ignoring, rejecting, or harshly scrutinizing information that casts doubt on it. That's from Gardner in 2008. Whether the issue is religion, politics, family battles, workship relationships, we all tend to look for information that proves we were right. We ignore evidence that contradicts our view. We would rather be right than wise. We get hardening of the categories. Unreliable memories. We regularly reshape our memories to fit our objectives. Daniel Gardner said, "Most people think memory is like a camera that captures images and stores them for future retrieval. But the truth is, memories routinely fade, vanish, or transform, sometimes dramatically. The mind can even fabricate memories. And we protest, no, not me. I'm objective. However, in reality, we systematically shape memories in order to support the narrative we favor. Tavris and Aronson said, between the conscious lie to fool others and unconscious self-justification to fool ourselves lies a fascinating gray area, patrolled by that unreliable, self-serving historian memory. Memories are often pruned and shaped by an ego-enhancing bias that blurs the edges of past events, softens culpability, and distorts what really happened. Over time, as the self-serving distortions of memory kick in, and we forget or distort past events, we may come to believe our own lies, little by little. We actively create the image and supporting narrative of a great spouse, child, or co-worker, or in turn, we can make them a villainous one. Think of it as photoshopping our memories. Negativity bias. We tend to be overwhelmed by bad things and forget good things. If you have a minor auto accident, a fender bender on the way to the party, how will that affect your evening? What will you remember about that day? Bad experiences and feelings take up a disproportionate place in our hearts and minds. For people who are especially sensitive or have had lots of bad experiences early in life, the effect on future feelings of safety is clear. For example, have you ever gotten sick after eating a particular food or a particular restaurant and decided never to eat that food again or go back to that restaurant again? Good news is, just as we can train to fear or avoid certain things or people, we can be untrained. Phobias can be unprogrammed. This is a fun picture of a couple. Two good and hard-working people, and it illustrates the problem of bias. Occasionally, the husband got irritated and complained about his wife's faults. Finally, she got tired of being criticized and declared, "You know, you have faults too." The husband replied, "Yes, but they don't bother me like yours." We process our perceptions through our own life stories. For example, in It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey thought his life was not worth much until he was able to see how the lives of the people he cared about turned out without him. It would be nice if we could all have an It's a Wonderful Life type experience. It would help us to see things differently through the lens of other people's life stories. The solution to bias goes beyond knowledge and skills. Let's have this story from Stephen Covey. He said his wife Sandra had an irrational attachment to Frigidaire appliances. They were discussing purchasing a new appliance, and she insisted upon a Frigidaire, even though he felt another model would be better meet their needs. She seemed unwilling to consider his reasons for wanting to buy another brand. This unwillingness to acknowledge his preferences began to frustrate him. Finally, they were able to spend some peaceful time together, and his wife opened up about her feelings. As a young girl, Sandra's father operated an appliance store. During a time when the store experienced great economic difficulties, Frigidaire was the only company willing to finance her father's inventory, which enabled him to stay in business. Since Frigidaire had been loyal to her family and saved their business, she felt a strong desire to be loyal to that brand. Understanding the feelings behind her position allowed her husband to replace his sense of frustration with empathy. He could finally see that her attachment to Frigidaire was not irrational or intended to be disrespectful towards his preferences. He could accept her loyalty to that brand. That's from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Tomorrow, we will talk about the first of the 3 keys to getting our hearts right. I hope you've enjoyed this introductory section, and we will see you again tomorrow.